Okay guys, so it's time for the BFS micro bearing test version 2.0, starring this reel right here, the Fishband Clamber HYPER Micro, which is probably one of the hottest bait finesse reels of the moment right now. But before we get into the heart of this video, I know this reel is very hard to find, so if you're looking to purchase one of these reels, I'm going to leave a link in the description to Don Kun Fishing, who I believe have plenty of right and left hands of these reels in stock. So go check that out if you're looking to buy one of these reels. And also I want to bring attention to a couple of bait finesse oriented channels that have recently gotten Clamber HYPER Micros of their own and are releasing videos and content on them. Now the first one everyone should know already, it's Roar Fishing. He got his hands on one of these and I believe he's released one video already and plans on doing more videos on this reel. And the second channel is going to be Obi-Wan Kenobi. He has a lot of bait finesse content, and in fact I think he's already done a couple of videos on this reel, including a cast comparison against the CURADO BFS, which is another hot bait finesse reel of the moment. So you definitely want to go check out his channel and check out those videos. And then lastly, Bass and Bonsai. He's got one of these reels recently and he's already released a few videos on it, and he actually tore the reel down and showed us exactly how the drag clicker works on this reel. And I'll have to say it's very different than any other drag clicker mechanism that I've seen on any other reel. So go check his channel out and his videos, because it's always good to get more than one viewpoint and opinion on the same reel. So with that being said, let us begin. So just in case you guys didn't know, about a year ago I already ran a micro ball bearing bait finesse test with the Shimano Scorpion BFS, and I'm gonna put a picture of the thumbnail of that video on the screen for you, and I suggest you go and check it out. Now ultimately in that test, the hybrid ceramic micro bearings did cast farther than stock, but the increase was so minimal that personally I think the results were a wash. I'm talking about 2 feet with the 1/8 ounce lure and half a foot with the 16th ounce lure. And that's because JDM Shimano stock bearings are so good, there's really no need to upgrade them. And the fact that the current Shimano bait finesse reels all come with micro bearings from the factory. Now if you watch the unboxing and analysis video I did of a Clamber HYPER Micro a few months ago, then you'll know I made a pretty bold statement and I said that this reel has the specs, at least on paper, to challenge or possibly even beat the top JDM BFS reels. But unfortunately, when I put that theory to the test up against the mighty ALDEBARAN BFS in an on-the-water cast battle using a line counter, the Clamber was no match for the ALDEBARAN. Now as a result of that side-by-side casting comparison, I felt that the Clamber's brakes were a little too strong, and this reel could possibly benefit from hybrid ceramic micro bearings to speed the spool up a little bit and possibly bridge the gap between this reel and the ALDEBARAN. So that's what I'm going to show you guys in this video today. Now the bearings I used were some AliExpress Ray Studio ceramic hybrid micro bearings, and no, these are not them. These are the stock spool bearings for this reel. I've already done this test, but let me show you what these bearings look like. These are actually the purple ones. You can see the micro bearings there. Then of course the spool bearing right there. So the plan was to do the same thing I did with the Scorpion BFS, and what I do is I go out on the field, I dial the brakes down as low as they'll go, and I measure 5 casts with the stock bearings for each lure, and then I actually swap out the bearings out in the field with the ceramic micro bearings, and I do the same thing and measure those casts to see which of the bearings will cast farther. Now since I was going to go out to the field anyway and do some cast measurements, I figured why not bring another top JDM BFS reel to do battle up against this Clamber. And that reel is the DAIWA SS Air. Now this reel is not made anymore, but back in the day it cost over $300. Now the Clamber HYPER Micro actually has a lighter spool than the SS Air by about half a gram, but it's also taller as well. Now the 2 lures I used for this battle is a little micro jerk bait that weighs about 1/8 of an ounce on the scale, and a crappie magnet with a jig head where I cut the hook off so it will come through the grass without getting hung up, and this weighs slightly under 2 grams on the scale. So let me show you the footage of the results of the 1/8 ounce minnow. Okay, so before we get into these results, let's go over the equipment I used. Now, both reels were spooled with the typical 4-pound mono that I buy in bulk. Both reels were casted with the same Major Craft Corza 6'5" ultralight rod. Now, the brake settings for each reel for this particular lure were as follows. The SS Air spool tension was set to just minimize side-to-side play, and then backed off 1 click, and the external mag force dial, the lowest I could go was 5.5. Now with the Clamber, spool tension was set pretty much the same as the SS Air, and the lowest I could go on the brakes was 14 clicks out from its maximum position. So let me go ahead and flash these numbers up for you. And it looks like the Clamber easily beat the SS Air with an average of 95.45 feet, while the SS Air did 90.5 feet. So each of these reels averaged at least 30 yards for this tiny micro jerk bait, but the Clamber took the easy win. Alright, so now let me show you the casting footage of the 2-gram crappie magnet jig. Okay, so who do you think won that battle? Now this battle was much closer, and let me go ahead and tell you the brake settings for each. Now the spool tension settings were the same, but with the SS Air I actually had to go to 6.5 on the dial, and with the Clamber HYPER Micro I could only go 12 clicks out from its maximum position. And let me show you the results. And once again, the Clamber HYPER Micro takes a win over the SS Air with an average of 63.83 feet, while the SS Air did 61.78. So a little bit over 20 yards for both reels for this tiny jig. Now I will say this, I should have used a different lure other than this crappie magnet, because this lure refused to fly straight through the air. It helicoptered and tumbled all the way through each cast. So if I use something like a 2-gram hard bait, then you could probably add at least 5 to 8 feet, if not more, to the length of each of those casts, at least in my estimation. So right there with those results, the Clamber HYPER Micro proved itself by beating a top performing, much more expensive JDM Bait Finesse reel in the DAIWA SS Air. So we're going to remove the SS Air out of the equation, and let's show you the casting footage for each lure when casted with the micro bearings. Okay, so let's not beat around the bush, and I'm going to put up the results for the 1/8 ounce micro jerk bait. And as you can see, the micro bearings actually casted shorter than the stock bearings, with an average of 90.61 feet versus the stock bearings 95.45 foot. So we lost an average of about 5 foot per cast with the micro bearings. Okay, so now I'm going to put up the results of the 2-gram crappie jig, and once again it looks like the micro bearings casted shorter than the stock bearings with an average of 61.33 feet versus the stock bearings 63.83 feet. So you're looking at about a 2.5 foot loss of distance average for the tiny 2-gram crappie jig. And this is the lure where the micro bearings should have shined. So if you're scratching your head and wondering, what happened, I pretty much know what happened, and I'm going to explain right now. Now the bearings did their job and they really woke the spool up, made it significantly faster. As you can see, they spin a long time, but because the spool was much faster, I actually had to turn the brakes up by 4 clicks for each lure. So instead of 14 clicks from the maximum position on the 1/8 ounce lure, I could only go out 10 clicks, and with the 2-gram crappie jig, instead of 12 clicks out for maximum, I could only go out 8 clicks out for maximum, or the spool would blow up. So a very disappointing result for the hybrid ceramic micro bearings, because not only was it casting shorter, you would lose the ultra smooth and ultra quiet casting nature of the Clamber HYPER Micro. But as I was calculating out these numbers, I thought of another test that I should have did out on the field, but instead I decided to take it out on the water. And that's because I don't only have just one clamber, I actually have 2. And what I did was I went out on the water with the same rod, same line, and I wanted to see if I could visually see a casting difference between these reels if the brake settings were the same for both reels, instead of dialing them down to their lowest possible setting. And let me let you check that footage out right now. Okay guys, so to complete this micro ball bearing test, I took both of my Clamber HYPER Micros, and looking at them now, it looks like this reel is actually darker than this one, but this is the reel that has the ceramic hybrid micro bearings, and this is the one that has the stock bearings, and I have them mounted on the same rod, same line, which is 4-pound mono, and I have the same lure, which is a 1.7 gram little jerk bait tied onto each. And what I've done was I've adjusted the spool tension to just minimize side to side play on both, and I've turned the brakes out to 10 clicks for maximum on both reels. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if the micro bearings will give us an advantage if we are casting a pretty light lure using the same brake setting. Maybe it'll give us more distance and ease of casting on the same brake setting versus the stock bearings, but there's only one way to find out. So I'm going to start off with the stock bearings first, and let's start casting. So with the brakes on 10, once again, this Clamber's got potent brakes. Lure is kind of going off to the right. Have to make an adjustment there. So I'm casting straight out this way, and with such a light lure and the brakes set to 10, it's going off to the left by about 5 foot of my target. So I have to make a small adjustment to get it to go straight. Right there. So what I did was I released the thumb bar a little bit early, or I released the spool a little bit early to make up for the lure going off to the right, or to the left, I should say. All right, a few more casts. I'm going to do some overhead as well. So it easily handles this 1.7 gram lure, as to be expected. I'm thinking that cast is going out there probably like close to 50 foot. You guys pay attention to where the lure is landing so we can compare with the other reel that has the micro bearings. Okay, so after casting the stock clamber, observations are that with this light lure and the brake setting where it is, it's going off to the left by about 3 to 4 feet. Now let's cast the clamber with the micro bearings. All right, micro bearing clamber, let's start casting. Okay, wow, just an easy flick, and I can see that the micro bearing clamber is going a little bit farther, maybe by a few feet. I would say maybe 1 or 2 at most. Ease of casting, as far as casting straight and accurate, well, I don't seem to see a difference there. I still have to release a little bit early to get this light lure to go straight. I am seeing some loops on the spool at the initial part of the cast, maybe like 1 or 2, then it sorts itself out. But I mean, other than the spool seeming like it's faster, you feel the vibration of the bearings, maybe you get a couple extra feet in cast distance. Ease of casting, as far as casting straight, is maybe marginally better. I don't see the advantage for these hybrid ceramic micro bearings. In fact, I think the better option is just to clean the stock bearings and give them some really ultralight oil. All right, so that was a really long cast, probably about 50 foot. So you will gain a few feet in distance with these light lures with the stock micro bearings, with the brakes set the same. So if you're the kind of person who likes to dial your brakes up just so you don't get a blow up or overrun, then the micro bearings will provide a slight advantage. It's not a huge one, but it is noticeable when casting side by side with the stock bearings. Ooh, blew the spool up there. Okay guys, let's go home and finish up my thoughts. So I'm back from out on the water, and in case you didn't understand what I was trying to do, basically I wanted to cast both reels side by side on the same brake setting to see if the micro bearings would provide not only longer casts but better accuracy. Now as far as longer cast goes, I believe towards the end there, yes, the micro bearings, when put in the same brake setting, outcasted the stock bearings probably by almost 5 foot on its longest casts. So that's a plus. But remember, ultimately the stock bearings can go lower on the brake settings and more than likely outcast the micro bearings. Now as far as ease of casting, honestly I really didn't feel that the micro bearings cast any easier, maybe just by a hair, but it's not anything that the stock bearings couldn't make up for just by turning the brakes down 1 or 2 clicks. And my opinion on the reason for this is that, once again, the stock spool on the clamber is so light that it's gonna be hard to improve on ease of casting on a spool this light. So does this mean that ceramic micro bearings are gonna be a total waste of time and money? I'm gonna say no. Because if that was the case, then Shimano and DAIWA wouldn't be putting them in their Bait Finesse reels from the factory. Now I will say this, I think it's gonna depend on the reel. And once again, the Clamber has one of the lightest stock spools of any Bait Finesse reel ever made, but these bearings may help a reel that has a much heavier spool, let's say like a Surinoi XF50, or reels that have, 9-gram spools and up. So there we go guys. It looks like under certain parameters with this particular reel, the Clamber, the micro bearings will outperform the stock bearings by a little bit. Alright guys, thanks a lot.